Good morning and welcome back to Patman Garage. My name is Patrick. If you hadn't met me yet, I appreciate y'all checking out a video. We're going to jump back into the Coyote Mach1 and we're going to work on building the brackets for the shaker portion of the hood today. So I'll show you my game plan and we'll see how it turns out. Alright, so there is the Coyote Swap. This is a Gen 2 2004 Mach 1. And we're going to get started on building the brackets. So I bought some angle aluminum. This is 1 inch by 1 inch. I bought this at Lowe's. Basically what I want to do here is I want to cut this in half. And I want to mount this to my studs that are coming up off the intake here. So we're going to have to drill some holes and cut it to length. And then I want to take this other guy and we'll make a bracket that goes from rail to rail, and then that will give us our front to back adjustment, and then we'll do some threaded studs, maybe some coupling nuts coming off of this because the back's needs a little bit more height, and that we can also adjust our height that way. So that's kind of the rough plan. We're going to get started on mocking and building this up. So you might have noticed I'm missing a stud out of the front. I went ahead and removed that just so I could figure out what size threads it was. The top portion, which is what we're going to be dealing with directly, is going to be the metric 6x1. So if you're looking for hardware for that, I'm going to use probably a small spacer and then a nut on top of that to hold my bracket down. And then, like I said, we'll get this thing drilled out and installed. All right, I got my first layer bolted down. So eventually the next step is going to be adding a bracket that's going to be inside these rail widths. So I need to cut this to length here on front and back. Basically that'll give me my front to back sliding adjustment, and then I'll drill holes once I figure out the exact placement of it. But pretty close to where I need to be with this guy, somewhere in this area. And then we'll take a look at the bottom of the shaker and see if there's some weight we can take off of it, because it's got a pretty heavy steel bracket underneath it. And then we had to figure out how to attach this to the actual shaker itself. All right, so there's the game plan. Got my bracket sitting loosely, and we can, like I said, we can adjust once we figure out where they're going to sit. So I'll grab the shaker. Originally I had measured on the hood, and from the back of the hood, which should be about where the wiper cowl is, to the opening for the shaker is 7.5 inches. So that's approximately where we need it to sit. Maybe slightly forward, maybe slightly backwards, maybe slightly left, maybe slightly right. We may still have to play with the height a little bit, but that's the overall game plan here. So as you can see, the profile of the shaker here drops down quite a bit in the back or the front side, so we shouldn't really need to do anything height adjustment wise. And on the back side we have quite a bit of a bracket that drops down here, and so for us to go from this height, whatever that ends up looking like, up to the bottom of the shaker, we have about 2 inches we need to cover height wise there, once we cut that bracket off and all that. So that's where the coupling nuts are going to come into play, and that will give us a little bit of height adjustment as well. Like I said, the front's pretty self-explanatory. We just need to drill some holes. We may need to do a little bit of spacer once we get the hood back on here to figure out exact fitment of it. But that's kind of the game plan. Hopefully we don't need to go down. That would be a problem. I guess not really, but we'll figure it out as we go along. All right, so I've not changed anything on the bracket since we last talked about those, and I just did a test fit on the hood. I can't quite get the hood to latch. Now, granted, I don't even have the hood bolted up on the hinges, but just trying to get a idea of fitment on it. I look like I'm pretty tight. I may actually have to come down slightly on the front. Still need to come up a bunch in the back because I got a whole air gap underneath the back. But like I said, I think the front needs to drop down a little bit. So I'm going to work on figuring out how to do that. And then we can do some more test fits. All right, first test fitting. I got the hood actually on, bolted down on the hood hinges and latched on the hood latch. Still have not done any sort of actual a fitment between the shaker and my brackets, but I got a little bit of movement here, which is kind of what we want. I don't know exact depth of what we need, if it's maybe slightly too high. So we can still play with that a little bit, but fitment wise, we look pretty nice. So I'm gonna do a little bit of research and see if it's maybe slightly too high. But I have the front drop down basically as low as I can go. And then the back, like I said, I'll have to adjust the height on that, but we're looking pretty solid. All right, so the bottom of the shaker side, this is the factory bridge bracket that was bolted to the front of the block. And there was some sort of, I guess, an isolator bushing or something that went in here. So we're going to get rid of all that. We don't want it. And so to be able to get out these big bolt plates, I'm going to need to slit the bracket here, and that should just slide clean out of it. I also have a area here that I have marked to be removed as well. This is going to be on the where the vacuum port is in this area. That I just need to notch around it. It was kind of sitting on it, so just give me a little more clearance on that vacuum port. So I'm going to get this dude cut out, and then we'll do another test fit and see what we look like. All right, I got my grinder out and made my cuts, so those plates should just fall right out, and we'll get this test fit again. So there's the grinder. Here's our two plates with the tabs cut off, and I went ahead and cut out my notch there. I should just slide right out. And if we get you in nice and close in here, we can see where I had to cut out that notch there to get around that vacuum. So that's kind of the idea there. So we're in pretty good shape with that. And then we'll do another test fit with the hood. All right, hood is down. A little bit of a rotation here, but overall, again, fitment looks really nice. I did do a little bit of a kind of finger test all the way around to make sure I wasn't too tight on the seal at any point. I think I'm overall pretty happy with it. We'll do some more fine-tune the fitment, and then we'll actually bolt the front of that bracket together. So I did my best to slot out these holes to give me a little bit of left to right adjustment. Not much, but just enough to tweak it. And then I drilled holes into the plate there. I intentionally did this one inboard because of how little overlap I have with the actual rail itself. So that the angle iron in this direction, I have about 1 inch of overlap on this side and only about a 3/8 of an inch on this side. So I may end up having to cut some material out of here to have a bolt head come through. So this just gives me a little bit more flexibility going forward, since apparently the Coyote seems to sit slightly towards the passenger side. Well, I popped off the actual shaker off of the engine bracket side, and this is just going to better illustrate what I was trying to show you earlier. So with the brackets sitting on the intake relatively straight, the shaker wants to sit slightly towards the driver's side and be centered. So I don't have very much room here. So I've outlined an area where I need to cut and notch out. That way I can put a bolt through the flat aluminum into the angle aluminum in this area. This side, I got plenty of space on this side. So that was kind of the game plan back there. The game plan on the back side, I'm thinking that this whole rear bracket I can just get rid of all together. I have enough material in here that I can mount my my angle flat, or my flat aluminum in this area somewhere, and then I can do my standoffs with my adjustable whatever they're called now, I can't think of them, but put the adjustable hardware over here, and that way I can save quite a bit of weight with this rear bracket, and again, these rear plates coming off. So converting from heavy steel to lighter aluminum, and just kind of overall minimizing our footprint as well, which means that a lot of this rear part of the aluminum bracket can get trimmed later. I may end up trimming a little bit off the front, and I may end up trimming off these feet altogether. That's where that bracket sat originally, and I cut that front lip off so I could slide them out. The benefit of cutting these is I'm going to have to run heater hoses across from here, and this one's not as big of a deal here, but this one's going to go turn and go back. But I'm going to have to do something with the heater hoses, and one of them's going to have to come across. So that will add a little bit of a challenge. So probably just easier to go ahead and cut these guys off. And again, we're just reducing a little bit more weight as well. I just need to make sure I keep enough material around this guy so we don't have any problems with, you know, bending the bracket or whatever. But that's the plan so far. So here is the finalized version of the shaker bracket. So we have the aluminum running here that bolts onto the studs of the Coyote intake, and I'm using this this guy bolts straight onto it. This guy bolts straight onto it. I do have a single extra nut as a spacer underneath it just to get it a little higher on the back, but technically really didn't even have to do that since I do have quite an adjustment on the rear. So the front is a angle iron or flat aluminum bracket that just goes straight across, and we're going to bolt to the angle iron here, and we're going to bolt to the bottom of the shaker bracket here. And then the rear is the same concept. We have a bolt here and here to bolt to the shaker bracket, and then a bolt on the corner that goes to the angle. And then this is a threaded coupler, which allows me to adjust my height in the rear to get it just dialed in just right. So really, I could actually take my nut out of the back and then just lengthen this a little bit. May end up doing that later. We'll see. But that's the final product there, and then the shaker just sits on top of that. Goes on the factory ball studs like that. And then we can shut the hood. So, hood is shut. We got a little bit of movement like we're supposed to have, and it is from all my research, it is supposed to be slightly towards the passenger side, just a hair. So it should be set up just like the factories. And I do have a little bit of adjustment. If we want to bring it a little bit over, we could. And that's about it. We'll have to get this thing running, and then we'll see it in action at some point down the road.